Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. Well, since the last time we talked, of course, a lot of things have happened, and one of the big kind of news stories out of Western Australia were the bushfires down here, kind of in the very southwestern corner of Australia. And I'm just showing you some satellite data from that event. So this is back on the 26th of April. And just to get a good look at the smoke, this is impressive to see this. I always wanted to bring this up because last time we kind of spent some of our video talking about the drought monitor, and just looking here across Australia, it's just a great reference, another reference point to keep track of your precipitation. Now, since I'm recording this on May the 1st, we're still waiting on BOM to update the entire April precipitation total. So I want to focus a bit on this drought monitor and just show you kind of the way things have been for the last 6 months. We come over here and click on 6 months, and now we can really start to see the effect of that drought that's been across a lot of the coastal regions of Western Australia. That's not to ignore other dry spots, as you can clearly see throughout the rest of Australia, but certainly one thing that we have to just take account of and kind of just remember going into the future is that despite this being a strong El Nino summer, I mean, take a look at this. This is year to date, so this would be January 1st to May 1st. We were wet across a lot of areas. Now, that's not to take away from those regions that have been dry, but the point to make here is that not every El Nino has the same flavor. And as we're making this big transition away from El Nino toward what could be La Nina, we have to continue to think about what that particular flavor of La Nina is going to be. Now, it's May 1st as I'm recording this, and as a result, we are waiting. We got to wait in about another week to 10 days before we get a whole new suite of longer range model forecasts in. But that's going to be important because May, being a transition month as we're going through autumn here, is very challenging to try to figure out where things are going to land next. But let me give you some bigger picture things. Looking here at the most recent ocean temperature data, we can kind of focus here across the Pacific while remembering most of the Indian Ocean is well above average in terms of ocean temperatures. But we're going to focus on two spots to analyze this current transition out of El Nino. And the first is Nino region 3.4. This is your most common region over which El Nino information is reported. And what we note here is that after peaking way back in January, actually it peaked right around Christmas, we've now gotten back down into what we call inso-neutral conditions. The ocean temperatures have backed off enough simply because the trade winds at times for the last few months have been surging out of the east, stronger toward the west. So we kind of keep getting those surges in trade winds, which are characteristic of La Nina-like behavior versus El Nino. The other area we're going to watch very carefully, and this is where El Nino's break down first, is right here in Nino region 1+2. And in that area, we've already dipped down to some pretty cold ocean temperatures and bumped back up here to neutral. But the reality of it is much of the upcoming longer range forecast will be dictated by the progression of the trade winds ultimately influencing flow across Australia, the interaction with the westerlies to our south, and how this all changes our ocean temperature patterns, which again just influences the ocean atmosphere coupled system interaction, right? That's basically just a bunch of words strung together to say it's all connected, and we're going to have to watch these things evolve. Now, thinking this through, I want to talk about one other thing. Throughout the month of April, most of that month, we saw high pressure sitting here. So this is a composite map of April looking at pressure anomalies. And having this large ridge that's tucked away in this particular area was important to our April precipitation patterns. And I want you to remember that because in the upcoming forecast for May, we're not expecting this to stay here anymore. And that's going to really influence, especially Eastern Australia, the whole side, what the precipitation patterns are going to look like as we transition into that time frame. Please tuck that away in the back of your head for a few moments. Now, as I look in the near term, so this is actually the same style map. I know it looks a little different, but this is where the ridge has currently positioned itself. For most of April, that ridge was over here. I bring this up because as we just walk through the next, this is through May 2nd, May 3rd, May 4th. Look, there's a weak trough that's sitting here over New South Wales. We'll talk about the precipitation from that. There's a trough that's just to your south. This is all a part of the westerly wind system, right? There's a trough that's just to our south here that's going to be bringing a little bit of precipitation to Western Australia. But as we just play this forward and work our way out there to the 6th and the 7th and the 8th and the 9th, what I'd like to make a case for here is that we've now seen that ridge begin to make a transition over the next 10 days to living here. Now, the reason I want to focus on that is because of what that's going to do to our temperature pattern and what it's going to do to where the precipitation is. And I'll be honest, in this video, we're only going to look out through the month of May. I don't have any overwhelming evidence to start to change my longer range perspective, which means I'm going to wait until we get the new model data, which comes out in the next 10 days. And in my next video, we'll hit all of that long range outlook for you again. But in the near term, I'm watching this ridge of high pressure. Okay, the other thing we're going to be watching is where the MJO is moving. So currently, the MJO is right here, sitting over parts of Indonesia. So this is where our best rising motion is. But as we go to day 5 through 10 and day 10 through 15, there seems to be a bit of a shift overall in the way that the tropics are behaving with suppressing motion or allowing vertical motion. And long story short, we kind of get into a pattern here as we approach, the middle of this month that could have a bit of a drier signal for most of Australia. Although best rising motion is going to be maybe closer, to Africa here. You can kind of see it on both sides of the maps. And that's going to be an important part of this as well. So given all of that, let's take a look at what this is going to mean towards temperatures first, because we certainly know that the month of April gave us, for most of Australia, a cool bias. How much? On the whole, we were looking at 2 to 3 degrees C below normal. But over an entire month, that's a lot. That's a large area, anchored here in the middle part of Australia, but that was a large area that's experienced below normal temperatures. Well, this is where we're expecting things to go in the near term. This is your next 7 days on average, and when I start to move this forward, it is a 7-day sliding window. And the repositioning of high pressure to our south is actually pulling away as we go toward the middle of the month, the risk of areas staying cooler than average, right? So as you look at this, we start to see the cool anomalies fade and the warmer conditions begin to show up, especially into this part of Queensland and then the lining right in through here in Western Australia. So that's a signal that I'm trying to diagnose and understand. And as a result of that change in the pattern, the movement of that the movement of that high pressure cell, the precipitation is going to change as well. So this is the same idea. It's a 7-day sliding window. So what we see over the next 7 days is there's a trough of low pressure here, and it's rainy, especially along the coast. We see another trough of low pressure here, and that's what's bringing in better chances for some moisture across this part of Western Australia. And again, a 7-day sliding window. So this would be day 4 through 10, which gets us out to May 10th. And as we let it go all the way out there to the 15th, this is where the precipitation pattern lands itself. Now, we just take note overall that if there's a spot that seems to be wetter, it's here along the coast and in the interior, with some chances early of some rain farther into Western Australia. But all of this is one kind of interconnected setup, and let's just go straight to the models to kind of see how this is all going to play out. So let's go ahead and get out here to May 2nd. What we're watching as we go forward is ridge here, high pressure, lows flanking it, right? So as we get into Friday, especially Friday night, we're going to watch for better chances for rainfall to come through here, scattered showers along the coast, and some possible down here due to this low pressure system. As we go into Saturday and Sunday and Monday, that low continues to kind of move its way toward this coastal area of Western Australia, while most of our rain through the end of the weekend is primarily confined to coastal regions. Watch this high, though. As we go into next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, do you notice how that high sat here but migrated? But the flow always comes around these like this, right? And I want to see if we're going to keep getting that kind of flow in this direction as we progress through, the midpoint of May. Because out here on the 8th, 9th, and 10th, that seems to be the most consistent pathway for the air to be moving here in this forecast. That gets you out 10 days pretty quickly there. So if we stitch it all together, let's just do this quickly. This is what I'm expecting in terms of total accumulated precipitation over a 10-day time frame. So generally speaking, most of the rainfall that's going to be in here is going to be less than 50 millimeters, and most of that's even going to be less than that, I think. Along the coast, the chances are much higher with the persistent flow out of the east. And with that low that's sitting here and kind of meandering toward Western Australia, we could be picking up a little bit of extra precip, but we're not looking at major totals down here. Outside of that, most of the rest of Australia is drier. So along the coast, interior of New South Wales, southern Queensland, and right down here. Okay, thinking about where this is going to go, let's now transition a bit into the longer range. This is the European model's forecast for May. And do you see where that ridge of high pressure is? That is the same ridge we started off talking about that for most of April was displaced way over here off the map. And if you just think about it, if we keep high pressure in place in this area, what typically happens? Well, we get the flow around this side that brings the moisture into the east. And so if the model's consistent with that, it should make sense that the forecast for May is drier west and wetter east. Now, again, the model has got an initialization bias, meaning that what it's got in it right now, it's continuing. But overall, this is the pattern that makes a lot of sense given the repositioning of that high pressure cell we diagnosed at the beginning of this video. Just to let you know, this is not an isolated forecast. I've also got very similar outlook for one of our other long-range models called the GFS. This is the Global Forecasting System. It's a model run in the United States, but it's global. And you can kind of see the same setup and the same pattern over the same time frame. And it would make sense that BOM kind of buys into this as well. If you look kind of at their chance of exceeding median rainfall, we now see the better chances here east and less west. So I'll be honest with you, I'll be putting this to the test to see how well the European model did pick up on the May pattern. We'll kind of evaluate that in my next two videos to see how well it did. But there's a lot about this that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, where do we take it from there? Can I give you kind of a broader look? I told you I wasn't going to cover too much long range because we did this last time, but I want to talk a bit about international weather as we start to wrap this up now that we've got this idea about May. The first thing I want you to see as you look at this is a May, June, and July forecast given by this forecasting group out of Columbia University, which is in the States. What they do is they apply a statistical correction to the forecast parameters. And we're looking here at the probability for precipitation, above normal, below normal, for May, June, July. Now, there's no denying that their forecasting system by July has got the highest chance of having a La Nina as all of its forecast parameters. In other words, we're going to likely be in a La Nina pattern. So it has gone over wet here. You can also see that most of Australia is expected to be near normal to wetter than normal as we progress into this winter time frame. Now, you might look around and say, well, I see a couple of these colors. Well, I understand that, but it is not like what we see in South America. Now, in South America, they have what's called a safrina crop. It's mostly a corn crop, but there's cotton in here. And this is when it's getting through its grain fill and moving toward harvest in late June, well, mid to late June. And it is expected to have a dry finish, a very dry finish. And this is an early start to the dry season in Brazil. Take note of a couple of other places. Southeast Asia expected to stay drier. Around the Yangtze River, more flooding. We've had issues right here in the southern Russian wheat belt that have been very, very dry as of late. And they're still kind of seeing this spring dryness possibly be an issue there. We have dryness that's creeping out of Mexico into the western plains of the United States. This is a lot of wheat, sorghum. We grow corn, soybeans, and a lot of cotton in this area. And we're really discussing a lot the risk of drought being in that region as well as we go into our late spring, early summer in the northern hemisphere. So I bring all of that up to kind of make a point here. Let's talk about the U.S. side of it, because this I think is something that's really worth seeing, especially for some of the crops we compete with you in. First, our winter wheat. We have a major spot of the state of Kansas that in the last week has missed every ounce of rainfall. Everywhere around this spot in Kansas to the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas, we've had tremendous amounts of rain. Now, I know this is in inches, but we still use imperial units here in the States. So this is 6 to 10 inches of rain that have fallen in this area. So we've gone over from record dry to flooding. And with this, we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 tornadoes just in the last week alone. My colleague Andrew Pritchard is a storm chaser, and he went out, and just to show you what some of these things look like here, I'll kind of blow this up. This is a short video of what we call a multi-vortex tornado. We have on average in the States around 1,500 tornadoes a year, but there's actually several smaller circulations within this broader tornadic circulation. And this is just the one video I have permission to show you because a lot of our storm chasers sell their content, but Andrew works for us, so he goes out and gets us information like this, and we can share it. But I will show you something else that he saw, which was many farms, a lot of infrastructure damage because of this. And this isn't even talking about the hail damage that we experienced from this really, really chaotic week of weather. And by the way, just today, while I'm recording this, we're having more severe weather outbreak in the midsection of the country. I stress this because of what this is going to do to slow down our corn planting, our soybean planting, what we're doing in terms of flooding out acres in our lower Mississippi River Valley early. But the drought situation on the backside of this is serious. There's a lot of hard red winter wheat grown right here, and it has been missed, whereas there's flooding immediately on the other side. So this is a ranks map. We have 132 years of data in the United States, and so when you look at this, the closer you get to 132, the drier you've been. That's like 130 out of 132. That's the driest. That, by the way, includes our Dust Bowl in this data. I stress all of this just so that you understand some of the issues that we're dealing with here in the United States. What I want to show you next is what we're expecting over the next 7 days. It's a lot of heavy precipitation on top of the same areas, which means we're not dealing too much with drought in major growing areas in the country. It's been too wet for us. But we need to watch what comes into Kansas. It's almost too late to revive a wheat crop, but we have to talk about what could be getting into this area. Huge wheat area for us. All right, beyond that, I want to show you a little bit more about Asia. I brought this up a minute ago. Let me kind of give you some of those details. This is over the last month looking at total precipitation, and now you can start to see some of these areas we're talking about. You probably saw in the news the floods in Dubai. Well, so much of the Middle East, from Pakistan over to Iran to Saudi Arabia, and of course right here where Dubai is, just incredibly heavy precipitation. Turkey's been dry, although forecast to be wet in the near term, they've been dry lately. And the southern Russian wheat belt has been quite dry. These surround the Black Sea. Come over here to the Manchurian Plain, the North China Plain, better rainfall, but a lot of flooding south of the Yangtze. And you can see very dry here in Southeast Asia and also the Philippines as of late. You see, I show you all of this because the last figure I want to hit on today is just this global outlook for the next 10 days. While we do expect the wetter conditions to stay here in this part of China and also up near parts of the North China Plain, it's not nearly as wet as it's been forecast. Could we get some better rains into Southeast Asia? Maybe. Do the Indonesian, all of the islands in the archipelago of Indonesia, do they continue to get heavy rains? Yes. But notice the wet conditions in the Middle East. Notice this spot right here, okay, in the Russian wheat belt, not expected to get rain, while Turkey and places to the south are. And that safrinha crop, well, the monsoon is done. The rainfall has ended here, and they're expected to receive no rain on better than 80% of their safrinha corn and cotton. While to the south in Rio Grande do Sul, that's the state I'm hovering over here, and into Argentina, they're expecting to have continual flooding. So as the northern hemisphere is making this transition through spring and the southern hemisphere through autumn, there's major discussion as to where we end up with the strength of this El Nino event and how it's gone. El Nino is done. And what we want to know is, where do the patterns land? And I'm going to tell you the next 45 days will likely set the script for your winter and our summer. So we're going to talk about it in these next 3 videos. Keep a close eye on these things, but as of right now, this is what I wanted to share with you. Hope you all have a good rest of your week and great weekend, and we'll pick this up again in a couple weeks. Thanks.